BHP reports a $21 billion profit as it looks to a greener future. Coles says fresh food prices are finally falling, but don't expect drops in dairy. And why Aussies are heading back to the mall. Welcome to Fear and Greed Business News, Australia's best business podcast. It is Wednesday, the 23rd of August, 2023. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, your interview today is with Patrick Coughlin, who spoke to us, would almost be 2 years ago now, so it's long overdue for another spot on the show. CEO of Creditor Watch.
Yes, so today they're releasing the Business Risk Index, and basically Creditor Watch has plenty of data from tens of thousands of companies, so they can actually see what's happening by sector in terms of invoices being paid and issued, the health of small businesses. It's a really fascinating chat because we dig into that data and work out which sectors are doing okay and which ones aren't.
Yeah, tremendous insight. It is a really good interview. It's coming up a bit later on. The main story this morning, Sean, is a big one. BHP has reported a slump in its underlying profit on the back of much lower commodity prices, but still managed a full-year profit of $21 billion.
Yes, so lower iron ore, copper and coking coal prices, plus a rare drop in the volume of West Australian iron ore sold during the year, meant the result was below expectations, and BHP's share price fell nearly 1% on the news. The final dividend of 80 US cents a share means the full year profit and dividend are both below consensus. In essence, demand for commodities in developed economies has slowed, while China remains the wild card. BHP said demand for iron ore and coking coal, both used in steelmaking, will depend on how effective stimulus packages are in boosting the Chinese economy. Significantly, the big Australian still expects iron ore prices to remain above $80 US a tonne, which is historically high. That's also good news for the federal budget. Overall, iron ore prices were down 18%, coking coal was off 22%, thermal coal was 9% lower, and coal prices were 12% lower.
Now, Sean, BHP is Australia's largest company. It's worth nearly $220 billion or thereabouts. How's it travelling?
Things don't look too flash in the near term, mostly because of China. Boss Mike Henry yesterday was really a little downbeat on that country. He basically said if Beijing can stimulate the property market, things will be okay. The fact that Henry reckons iron ore prices will remain above $80 US a tonne, in part because of a structural shift post-COVID, so I think higher labour costs, that will push up iron ore prices. That's probably good for BHP because it is a relatively low-cost iron ore producer. The real X factor is how big the returns are from BHP's huge spending in future-facing commodities, things like copper, nickel, potash. That's where the big spending's happening. In fact, BHP will be spending about $15 billion across this financial year and the same the next financial year. Whether or not that money is well spent will very much determine BHP's long-term future.
All right. Well, that's BHP. How did the rest of the local market perform yesterday?
The S&P ASX 200 closed up slightly to finish at 7,122 points. The banks had a better day, led by National Australia Bank and Westpac. Not so much the retailers. After Coles reported its half-year results, more on them shortly. Coles, in fact, finished down nearly 7%. Woolies was off 3%. Wesfarmers ended the day 2.3% lower. Telstra was the standout, jumping more than 3%. Big movers, though, yesterday. Software group Altium reported after close on Monday evening. Yesterday, its share price finished 25% higher, best on the day of the top 200. Next best was Megaport, which reported yesterday. Its share price closed 17% higher. Illumina was at the other end of the spectrum. It reported it, and its share price dropped 8%. In fact, it was the worst of the top 200.
Geez, a bit happening. What about international markets? What's going on?
Generally, global equity markets have been a bit higher over the past 48 hours or so. A couple of standouts. Chipmaker Nvidia on Wall Street. Its share price surged ahead of its earnings report later in the week. It's testing new highs and it's up about 230% this year. We know that story pretty well. And Tesla's share price also jumped about 7% or so. That's off its 1 month low. It's still up 113% this year, but notwithstanding what's happened in the past 36, 48 hours, it hasn't actually had a good run over the past month or so. Oil prices have come off a bit while gold keeps rising. It's trading around $1,900 US an ounce, and the Aussie dollar is up a touch, buying 64.3 US cents.
We have a big show coming up. There is a lot of news to get through. We'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, Coles has a bit of good news for customers. Fresh produce prices are falling. Finally, even though grocery items and dairy products still remain pretty expensive.
Yes, the country's second largest retailer said revenues across the group rose 5.2% last financial year, delivering a $1 billion net profit. I kind of like supermarket results because they give a pretty cool insight into what's happening on the ground. Boss of Coles, Leah Weckert, said cost of living pressures remain the most significant issue for customers, but that's not necessarily bad for Coles because people are cutting back on other stuff, beauty services, entertainment, eating out, that type of thing, but not necessarily groceries. Food price inflation for the 12 months was a hefty 6.7%. The good news, though, was it would fall into 5.8% for the last quarter. The bad news in the result really was a blowout in costs, and the group's share price closed down 6.7% yesterday. Coles expects to open about 15 stores and close 6 this year. A really interesting detail out of the Coles announcement was growing stock loss. Stock loss is otherwise known as shrinkage. It's due to theft and food waste, and mostly it's about theft. It's up 20% year on year. Mostly it reflects cost of living pressures. In fact, the Australian Retailers Association now puts theft at 2 to 3% of retail sales. That's massive.
That is huge. And I love how you mentioned shrinkage there. Almost half expecting me to giggle at that.
It hadn't even crossed my mind. What I do want to know, though, have you ever been to the self-serve checkout and not paid for something?
No, God, no. No. Oh, dear Lord, no. No. Have you?
No, never. I couldn't do it. I don't even, lift the oranges up slightly so the weight's a little less when you put them on the weigh machine. I can't even do that.
Sure you don't. Sean Alma goes to the shops and buys 18 bags of brown onions, and instead it's actually oranges and avocados and asparagus, whatever else is expensive. And they go, geez, that guy seemed to have bought a lot of onions.
I haven't thought about that, but we should just do carrots because carrots are always so cheap.
Well, this is why they have put the cameras now on the self-serve checkouts.
Yes.
To help stamp out shrinkage.
Let's move on.
Yes, I think we best. Interesting that Coles is expecting to close 6 stores. You don't tend to think of supermarkets closing like that.
So if you go into the detail, I don't know this for a fact, but I dare say it would be an older store, or sometimes they have smaller stores which they close and they're replaced by so they're opening 15 stores. I'd be pretty confident those 15 stores on average are much bigger than the 6 they're closing. Although, having said that, of course, they have those Woolies has the metro stores. They have those smaller stores too nowadays.
Yeah, that's a good point. And staying in the retail sector, Sean, Scentre Group, which owns Westfield malls, announced a strong half-year result, sending its share price up 4%.
Okay, I love this stat from the result yesterday. So far this calendar year, 314 million customers have visited a Westfield mall, up nearly 10% from a year ago.
Wow.
Now, I don't know how many days there have been this year so far, but it's certainly more than 1 million customers a day. That's pretty cool.
Look, I would guess about 200 days so far this year.
Yes. Maybe 220 or something, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Still, that is a lot of people per day visiting Westfield.
So what's that? That'd be like 1.4 million people per day or something like that?
I'm going to say that this would be riveting listening, hearing us take guesses at how many days there have been so far this year, and then using those inaccurate guesses to then calculate how many people per day have visited Westfield. Let's just say it's up nearly 10% from a year ago, and 314 million people is a lot.
Yes. And you know what? Well, Chief Executive Elliot Rusanow, he said it reflects the group's ability to create experiences for customers. Now, once upon a time, you used to go to the mall to shop. Remember that? Buy clothes and things like that. Not so much anymore. It's about services. Think food. Think of all the health providers there. Banks are in malls nowadays. And then, of course, entertainment. You have cinemas, those arcade games, all that sort of stuff. Basically, it's kind of about creating an experience nowadays. Now, overall, Scentre announced a 10% rise in net operating profit. In fact, it was its best ever June half. Importantly for the group, which was really hit hard by COVID, the new leases it's signing are at rates higher than previous leases. So during that whole COVID debate, there was discussion. Some retailers just refused to pay the rent. And then there was a discussion about how much they should pay. Anyway, that's on the up again. So if you're a shareholder in Scentre, that's good news.
All right, let's shift to politics now. And Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says the intergenerational report, which is due for release tomorrow, is an important signpost for where Australia is headed over the coming decades.
When asked whether the report's expectations that economic growth will slow due to an ageing population and lower population growth were cause for concern, Albanese said no. And he wasn't impressed, but he did say we need to plan for it as a nation. Surely it's a bit of a concern, isn't it?
I would think so. I don't think you can really dismiss it quite
like that. Yeah, I'm with you. The Prime Minister was also spruiking a yes vote in the Voice referendum later this year. Does that every day, it seems. He said a successful referendum on the Voice would lift the country up and allow the nation to become more mature. Now, the Prime Minister was speaking on the steps of the Sydney Opera House, and he was standing alongside Pat Farmer. Do you remember him?
I do.
Former Liberal MP, ultra-marathon runner. Apparently, Farmer is spending 6 months jogging around the country to campaign for the Voice.
Okay.
Good on him. If that's what you do, that's what you do.
Yep.
And just before we leave politics, Pauline Hanson's One Nation faces an uncertain future in New South Wales after the party lost 2 out of 3 of its sitting MPs, including the state leader Mark Latham, who alleged in Parliament that a recent federal takeover of the state branch is a plan to defraud the state's party. Pretty incredible allegations, that one.
Yeah, it is. Now, this is a pretty incredible story, this next one, Sean. Adam Cranston, the son of the former ATO Deputy Commissioner Michael Cranston, has been sentenced to at least 10 years and up to 15 years in prison for his role as one of the key architects of the $105.6 million Plutus tax fraud.
Incredible story. Adam Cranston received at least $6.86 million from the fraud, and according to the Financial Review, Justice Anthony Payne in the New South Wales Supreme Court said Mr Cranston does not appear to understand even now the gross violation of societal norms that his conduct in running the tax fraud from 2014 to 2017 represented. Cranston appeared via video wearing prison greens and a high-vis vest. Justice Payne said that Cranston played a critical role in operating the scam, in which subcontracting companies collected about $141 million in tax payments while providing a payroll service to clients, but they only paid $34 million of that to the tax office. Anyway, the upshot, Adam Cranston is going to spend at least 10 years in jail.
Sean, Woodside said it is engaging constructively with trade unions ahead of talks today, which, if they don't make progress, could disrupt global energy markets.
Yeah, so Chief Executive Meg O'Neill said she felt good about how bargaining has progressed so far, but clearly the market isn't as confident about negotiations, with European gas prices jumping 12% yesterday. O'Neill said unions could take a range of options that would impact the company either slightly or more severely. She was speaking after the oil and gas giant posted a 6% jump in first half profit to more than $2.7 billion, a new record. A complete shutdown of 3 offshore gas platforms would essentially close down the 16.1 million tonne a year Northwest Shelf LNG plant near Karratha. It would also not be able to process gas from the Pluto offshore field. That would send gas prices globally much higher. Woodside share price finished down 1.25% yesterday.
Sean, Justice Stephen Gageler will succeed Susan Kiefel and become the 14th Chief Justice of Australia.
Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and Attorney General Mark Dreyfus said New South Wales Supreme Court Judge Robert Beach-Jones will fill the vacancy caused by the Chief Justice's retirement in November. When Gageler was appointed in 2012 by the Gillard government, he was the Commonwealth Solicitor General and is now the most senior judge on the court. It is a cracking story, Michael. He grew up in a town called Sandy Hollow. It's got about 150 people in the Upper Hunter Valley in New South Wales. He's the son, in fact the grandson as well, of sawmillers from the area. He's now the number one legal mind in the country. Well, he will soon be the number one legal mind in the country.
That is pretty extraordinary. And Justice Gageler wasn't the only high-profile executive mover yesterday. Ida Buttrose said that she'll not seek a second term as chair of the ABC board.
The 81-year-old former high-profile TV personality and Women's Magazine editor took over the role in 2019 from Justin Milne, who resigned after allegations of political interference in the decision to sack former managing director Michelle Guthrie. Buttrose was chosen by former PM Scott Morrison. Her tenure ends on March 6 next year.
Isn't that a high-pressure job?
Man, I've watched her and her predecessors, and there is no win in that job.
No.
Very tough.
No, I think one term would be enough for anyone, don't you reckon?
Yeah, I think so. I think Ida Buttrose has handled it really well with incredible grace. I don't know her at all, and you only watch her from afar, and she's had such a storied and controversial history, but I just think she's done a great job with class running the ABC.
Yeah, in a really, really tough environment. Now, Sean, Viva Energy's first half net profit halved from last year as problems at its Geelong fuel refinery crimped margins, overshadowing strong retail and industrial sales.
Viva, which supplies about a quarter of Australia's liquid fossil fuels to petrol stations, ports and airports, flagged the earnings hit in July amid problems at its refinery. Its retail business, which supplies fuel to Shell-branded petrol stations, posted a 40% jump in pre-tax earnings driven by higher prices and demand. Yesterday, after the announcement, Viva's share price fell 1.3%.
And what about other earnings results yesterday? There were plenty of them.
Yeah, there sure were. Look, a couple of highlights. Monash IVF, which is one of Australia's oldest and largest fertility services, says cost of living pressures and higher interest rates haven't hurt demand. With new patient registrations up on last year's numbers, the company expects to grow profits this financial year, helped in part by higher prices in Australia for IVF and ultrasound services. The other side, though, retailer Kogan.com, it said sales were lower on the back of cost of living pressures, but the group has made a dent in its inventory stockpile, been a problem for that group for quite a few quarters. Founder Russell Kogan said investors should start valuing Kogan.com like a tech stock. There you go.
Really?
I don't know why. It's probably not a bad thing to say, really, because tech stocks are valued higher than retailers.
Oh, okay. All right. I suppose just because one person says it, though, doesn't necessarily mean everyone's going to do it.
No, I don't think they will.
Now, in international news, Sean, Thaksin Shinawatra, the former premier who was ousted in a coup, has been living in exile since 2006, returned to Bangkok for the first time yesterday on the day that the Thai parliament was due to vote for a new prime minister.
Thaksin was living in self-imposed exile in part to avoid facing corruption and abuse of power charges affiliated with his telecom business. While in exile, he shuttled between England and Hong Kong and Dubai, United Arab Emirates, basically avoiding Thailand, fearing that he wouldn't receive a fair trial, according to a report of the New York Times. He was tried for most of these cases in absentia and found guilty of several charges. His arrival back comes after months of political turmoil in Thailand. There's little clear leadership. The top vote winner in the May general election was functionally blocked from office by allies of the country's military and monarchy. It'll be very interesting to see what happens over the next few days.
One more, Sean. Japan will start releasing more than 1 million metric tonnes of treated radioactive water from the wrecked Fukushima nuclear power plant tomorrow, putting into motion a plan that has drawn strong criticism from China.
Yeah, so the plan, approved 2 years ago by the Japanese government as crucial to decommissioning the plant operated by the Tokyo Electric Power Company, has also faced criticism from local fishing groups who fear reputational damage and a threat to their livelihood. No surprises there. Yesterday's announcement comes a day after the government said it had won a degree of understanding from the fishing industry over the release of the water. Japan has said that the water release is safe. The International Atomic Energy Agency, which is the UN's nuclear watchdog, okayed the plan back in July. It said that it met international standards and that the impact it would have on people and the environment was negligible. Still, don't think I'd like to be there.
No. And negligible, that's good, but
it's not zero.
It's not zero, is it? All right, up next is the Fear and Greed Daily interview. You are speaking today, Sean, with Patrick Coughlin, CEO of Creditor Watch.
All about small businesses and how they're performing, particularly, we break it down via sectors. So fascinating chat.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. Do you know what today is, Sean?
Wednesday.
It is Wednesday, which means there's a new episode of How Do They Afford That? Out today, our sister podcast featuring Canna Campbell, the founder of Sugar Mama TV, a financial planner. And she talks to me today about how to get ahead if you are a low-income earner. Because often we talk about kind of investments and a whole bunch of different strategies and things. But if you're a low income earner, there just isn't as much money to go around. And so a few kind of ways to really try and make some improvements and make some changes and try and set yourself up for financial independence. So it's look, I'm biased. I think it's a pretty good chat. You'll find it wherever you listen to podcasts. Just search for How Do They Afford That? And I'll put a link in today's show notes as well. Thank you very much, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It is Wednesday, the 23rd of August, 2023. Make sure you're following the podcast and join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, X, and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was the Fear and Greed Business News. Have a great day.